Welcome, everyone, to another edition of SCRC's Let's Talk Caregiving. I'm your host, Roberto Velasquez, President and CEO of SCRC, and I'm here as always with my co-host, Martha Rañón, our Executive Vice President. Hi, Martha.
Hi, Roberto.
Today we have a very special guest, Pilialoha Estall. Pilialoha has her own PR agency and think tank, City in Design, which focuses on public and mental health and youth development. She is passionate about helping individuals and organizations that provide essential programs and services in their communities. She is a lifelong advocate, is working towards her doctorate in public policy, and now she finds herself a caregiver, and more exact, a sandwich generation caregiver for her mom. Welcome, Pilialoha.
Thank you, Roberto. Thank you, Martha. It's a pleasure to be here today.
You know, we're so happy that you're here today because as we go and themed throughout the podcast that we record, you know, caregiving is so universal. I can go to pretty much any meeting, depending on the audience. And if it's a young audience, at least a third of them will be caregivers already or know somebody who's caregiving, like their parents. If it's an older audience, at least 2/3 of the room will raise their hand and say they're caregiving. You know, throughout the country, there's almost 48 million people that are caregivers. And in San Diego County, we estimate about close to 500,000, 490,000 caregivers of adults. And wow, that's a lot of people. And again, what we're finding is that the majority of the family caregivers that we see through Southern Caregiver Resource Center are in your situation, are working adults, have children at home, and are also providing care and support to an aging or relative with some form of disability, often with Alzheimer's or related dementia. And so here we are, once again, speaking with a caregiver that falls in this category.
Pilialoha, I am so glad that you're here because I know you have a lot that you balance on a daily basis. And I'm sure our audience can relate to you being a working individual, but also caring in this case for your mother. And, you know, Roberto, at all the times that I talk to caregivers, the primary cause of stress is that inability to do it all, right? I mean, we have this notion that we can balance it all, we can do it all, we can just kind of roll up our sleeves and make it happen. But really, it's that emotional toll and it's really that physical strain on your body. And I want to hear from Pilialoha because I know that you are really focused on the mental health aspect of helping our communities. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Thank you, Martha. That's a great question. I do very, very, very much so advocate for mental health. And that's on top of caregiving. And when you look at mental health across the spectrum, really trying to figure out how to balance yourselves within a caregiving situation, especially sandwich generation caregiving, has been mind-opening. It's been, I would say, a little bit difficult at times trying to navigate that, being someone passionate in the mental health world. I'm trying to find ways to have those conversations with other individuals in the situation, other organizations that are passionate about helping caregivers. We're in unfortunately, a booming stage for sandwich generation caregiving. It's more common, as you mentioned, Roberto. So I'm not sure if that's something where we can talk a little bit about in more detail.
Yeah, and absolutely. And I think what happens almost in every single case, of course, we know, you know, how overwhelming it is. Your mind is always racing. What are you going to do next? What kind of appointments you have to schedule, coordinating doctor appointments, coordinating even nutrition at home or other types of things that are going on a regular basis, monitoring the individual. But then and so that's part of it. So we can talk a little bit about that. But the other part of it is the emotional toll, and you're talking about mental health. And we know that being a caregiver without support for a few years can lead to clinical depression. A lot of family caregivers, even up to between 40 and 60% of family caregivers, will experience clinical depression. And some of it is that from the overwhelming part of it. And the other is from, the loss, the ambiguous loss, the fact that your relationship with your mother is changing. You're no longer the daughter. You're now taking care of that individual, or trying to coordinate to take care of that individual. So I'd like to talk about that a little bit, because that seems to have happened to all of us who've been caregivers.
That's right.
Roberto, you bring up a strong fact, and I think, Martha, your statement in the beginning really compounds that. It's that transition of caregiving as well, and that mental strength to be able to go through that transition with your loved one is really hard, because that relationship changes constantly. And so not only are you battling with trying to do it all, and Martha and I can probably both say, as women in the caregiving role, we try to do everything, especially as parents and working professionals. And when you're trying to care for that loved one and you're seeing that relationship change and you can't handle it all, or you can't do it all, then you feel like you're failing. I think that's where it's the most difficult as an individual, trying to do it all, knowing you can't, but you still feel like you're failing.
There's something to be said about that statement, Pili, that society really needs to change the way they support, or maybe don't support, working caregivers. And I think especially women who are in this situation. I know how involved you are in your community, all the things that you do, and then all the caregiving that you have to do on a daily basis. I look at myself and the things that I have had to do, but also the things that I do now as a parent. I mean, technically that's still being a caregiver, right? It's a different type of a person that I'm caring for, but I am responsible for their well-being. And there's this expectation that, and I think especially during the pandemic, that the woman, the mom, the working, mother, had to pick up the slack, and added that emotional labor that is actually a term that is very much prevalent for women who are having to pick up that extra responsibility, that extra, task that the other person can do it as well, but somehow that working mother ends up doing regularly.
Yeah, I agree. In fact, even our data shows that the majority of our family caregivers are women. I think the numbers close to 80% of clients that come to us are women. And that's not to downplay the role of the male caregiver, but it's just like Martha was saying, that's kind of like our society's go-to is the mom, is the daughter, is the cousin that maybe might be considered more nurturing, or just takes on that role because of expectations. It is definitely more challenging, because then you have all those other factors that you have to balance, like children and school and their PTA meetings and other things that are going on.
And I think one thing that I found very instrumental, I think I mentioned it earlier, was reaching out to others. Sometimes we forget to do that, but it could be a family member, it could be a organization that you admire or work with, or somebody who you might respect.
So, Pilialoha, I know that in conversations with me, you've talked a little bit about some of the challenges that you've experienced as a caregiver. And one of the ones that I think that a lot of people can identify with is coordinating these medical appointments for your mom and some of those struggles. And I don't know if you wanted to share some of those experiences, because I know somebody might want to know that they're not alone, and maybe how do you deal with those types of problems?
That's a amazing question, Roberto. I wish I had the perfect answer for you on that. I have actually personally found it very challenging. So I know individuals listening are going to say they went through the same thing. Depending on the ailment and what you're dealing with, I'm working with about 8 to 10 doctors, and it has been very, very overwhelming for me as a working professional, having to be able to jump off my phone in the middle of a board meeting because the doctor can't set a time with me has been probably one of the most frustrating challenges I've ever experienced So much so that I'm like, something's got to change. So I think trying to navigate that and educating our doctors and trying to work with individuals like SCRC and organizations to really help the caregiver is so important, because there's so many things that people forget that we can't do it all. And just the little things like coordinating 8 doctors into one, especially in the major diseases, can just overwhelm you. It could take me 2 months just to coordinate 8 doctors into one. And I don't feel that it should be that difficult.
Yeah, it just is. It's very challenging. And I know that, Martha has done educational programs in the community to help educate the community as well as family caregivers when they are dealing with, how to prepare for doctor's appointments and, have your checklist ready and make sure that they have you as a contact. But that doesn't always work, because when you're dealing with 8 different doctors, they might be hesitant to still give you information or talk to you without your mom's consent, and your mom can't give consent. So that you go back into this vicious circle, and that becomes very challenging.
And that's why it's important to ask for help from the professionals if you find yourself not able to figure out what you need to do next. I know when I was a caregiver, I thought I could just pick up the phone, go to a website, get a brochure. But sometimes you need someone who understands that area completely and guides you through it all.
I really, I admire so much the sandwich generation caregiver, because they are being pulled in so many different directions, and oftentimes hesitant to reach out for some assistance because they already have so much on their plate, and like, oh my gosh, to add one more thing. But I think that you all have made a good point from the standpoint of, accessing resources like contacting Southern Caregiver Resource Center, because immediately you're put in contact with people who know what you're dealing with, as well as are experts in helping you assessing what you're going through, your needs, and helping you put a care plan together for not only the short term, but also the long term, which could include support groups, which could include educational programming, which could include even some respite care to give you a break at home. Of course, funding being available. But there are so many different ways that Southern Caregiver Resource Center can help. And the family consultants are really great at just talking things through. Once you have addressed certain things, other things will pop up. And then you have someone to talk to, someone to be able to listen to what you're saying, no judgment, and help you come up with solutions.
Pilialoha, I wanted to ask, how is it that you were able to realize that you needed help, and what have you been able to implement that has allowed you to balance and manage all of the different responsibilities that you have?
Thank you, Martha. I'm obviously very familiar with SCRC. I'm such a passionate person about supporting your organization and what you do for so many caregivers. And I'll be all honest, when I call the doctors and doing all that, I don't think of calling you. And I think that's part of the battle that we maybe as women or mothers and caregivers are trying to do it all. We just think we can do it all, and really maybe taking a step back and realizing it's okay to call SCRC, and they probably could help you do it a lot more efficiently if you just called them, but in my head, I'm like, they're not going to call the doctors for me, but I know you could map it out for me and make it a lot more fluid. Again, we're just in turbo mode, and we're in automatic mode where we have to really sometimes take a step back and have those, care plans in place. So that's definitely something I'm guilty of. Even though I know about you, I still don't fully utilize you. And I think that's where we have to really pay attention.
Yeah, and being in turbo mode for such a long time, as you say, Pilialoha, is actually very detrimental to your health. I mean, you're more susceptible to colds and the flu and just not feeling well because you're just not resting at all. And I think that's one of the real neat things that we do at SCRC under Martha's education department is teach people about self-care. I mean, we focus quite a bit on interactive educational programs that actually teach you even how to breathe, how to meditate, how to do yoga, tai chi, music therapy. I mean, the list goes on, and they're recorded and on our website, many of them, so that you can enjoy and look at your leisure because you're working. So you might have to click on when you're relaxing in bed at 9 o'clock at night.
What I tell caregivers is you really have to practice self-awareness. You really have to be able to notice within yourself those boundaries that you're talking about, right? Those limitations. Think about it. If your stomach is upset, maybe you're hungry, and so you eat and then it goes away. And we need to practice that throughout our lives. You know, if I'm feeling like I'm really tired, maybe I need to take a nap or I need to slow down a bit. What do you think, Pilialoha?
Again, I'm aware of SCRC. So the fact that I'm aware of what you do, yet I am in such automatic mode and still not utilizing SCRC to its fullest potential makes me only imagine what individuals who have no idea that you exist in any capacity. So just thank you for all that you all do to help get us to the next stage, because we can't do it without individuals like you. So I just want to thank you for that, because again, I'm familiar with SCRC, but I'm still not utilizing you to your full potential.
Well, you're
Thank you.
welcome
Yes.
to contact us anytime, Pilialoha. We're here for you.
Absolutely. Any final thoughts? Because we're almost out of time for this segment. In my opinion, I just think, people should not hesitate. People should reach out and not wait till it's a crisis, because when you're in turbo mode and then it's a crisis mode, I don't know, that might be way too much to overcome to get help.
And my final thought is you don't have to do caregiving alone. We are here to support you. We understand it. A lot of us have gone through it. We have been caregivers, so we understand how much you do and how challenging and stressful it all is.
I agree, Martha and Roberto, and thank you again. And as I said, just those little conversations with people who are professionals, like I mentioned with my aunt, just those little conversations and thinking I should just reach out to you guys more is really helpful for me. So thank you for having me on, because I have a feeling that's going to help me in the future.
Good to hear.
Thank you. Well, that's all the time we have left for this edition of Let's Talk Caregiving. To hear more of our podcasts, follow us on your favorite podcasting platform or visit our website at scrc.care. I want to thank Martha for co-hosting another important discussion, and our guest, Pilialoha Estall, and our audience for tuning in. I love saying your name, Pilialoha Estall. That is a cool name. And as Martha and Pili were saying, if you are providing support to a loved one, you don't have to do this alone. Asking for help is not a sign of weakness, it's a sign of strength. To connect to our programs and services, visit our website at scrc.care or call us at 1-800-827-1008. If you live outside of San Diego and Imperial Counties, visit our website at caregivercalifornia.org to find the Caregiver Resource Center nearest you. To support our efforts and make a tax-deductible donation, please go to scrc.care and click on the Donate tab. And remember, SCRC is here for you,
caring for those who care for others.
Thank you.